Chapter 52. Interrupted quiet. Less than third person POV greater than. The sound of boots echoed faintly through the corridor as Rick, Itachi, and Daryl made their way back into Block C. Some of the others were still scattered around the common area, sorting supplies or talking among themselves. Jim was the first to notice them. He set aside Dale's old tools he'd been sorting, and called out, "How'd it go?" Itachi was the first to answer. "We cleared the tombs. But we should still do another sweep to make sure nothing slipped through." Rick nodded, lifting the 3 worn folders in his hand. "And we also found these." Carol, who'd been sitting with Lori nearby, turned towards him. "What are those?" Rick looked her way. "Files on the prisoners. I want everyone to take a look." Shane, who'd been leaning against a nearby wall, frowned. "You serious? You're really thinking about letting them stay here?" Rick met his eyes. "If they behave, yes. None of them have redeemable charges, and their behavior reports are clean, especially Big Tiny's and Oscar's." Daryl snorted. "Only one who's a little off is Axel." Carol glanced at him, waiting for him to go on. Rick sighed quietly. "He's what you'd call a flirt. Practically tried it with every woman who walked by." Lori's voice cut in, with disgust. "And you want to let someone like that stay close to us?" Itachi's gaze met hers. "We read everything in detail because of that. He has no harassment charges and never targets women who are taken." Daryl added, "Guy just likes runnin' his mouth, but far as we could tell, he never meant nothin' bad by it." Rick looked between them all. "And I invited them to have dinner with us tonight." Shane's expression darkened. "First, you let them stay in the prison, now you're breaking bread with them. What's next? Inviting them to live in our cell block." He pushed off the wall, his voice sharpening. "Do I gotta remind you what happened with the last group we met?" Shane started heading towards Rick, anger rising with every step as he thought more on how outrageous the idea sounded, but then he stopped. His body just froze. A cold sweat ran down his neck as his body refused to listen. He looked between Rick and Daryl, confused, until his eyes met Itachi's. The moment they did, his hands started to shake. He didn't know why. He wasn't afraid, at least, he didn't think so, but his body refused to move closer. Rick frowned, stepping closer. "You alright?" Shane stepped back, shaking his head. Yeah, I'm fine. Just do what you want." He turned toward the cells, forcing his hands to steady and pretending nothing had happened. Lori watched Shane retreat towards the cells, worry flickering across her face, but she didn't say a word. Rick noticed, his eyes narrowing slightly before turning back to Daryl and Itachi. Daryl broke the silence first. "The hell was that?" Itachi just shrugged, looking just as unsure. Neither of them pushed it further. Whatever happened with Shane wasn't worth the trouble right now. The 3 of them sat down at one of the nearby tables, turning their focus to what came next. Itachi started. "First things first, we have to go back to the farm and bring the animals here." Daryl leaned back in his chair. "Chickens'll be easy enough, maybe a little messy. But how the hell you plan on moving a whole damn cow?" Herschel mentioned they had a small trailer for livestock, Itachi said. "We'll use that. Glenn and T-Dog will help load everything, then head back with the animals once it's done." Rick thought for a moment. "There is a gas station along Route 85 you could try your luck for fuel. There's also a small veterinary clinic a few miles past the farm that could have meds. And a hardware store just off the highway. Between those 3, you'll cover what we need most." Daryl looked at Rick, a hint of a smirk tugging at his mouth. "Damn, you really got this all figured out, huh?" Rick smiled faintly. "You're the ones going out there, the least I can do is help you plan it, and find the quietest spots to keep you safer." Itachi gave a small nod, appreciating that Rick was looking out for them. The moment lingered for a beat before all 3 of them stood, wrapping up their plan. Rick looked at both of them. "You 2 get some rest tonight. I'll let Glenn and T-Dog know to be ready in the morning." Daryl tilted his head slightly. "Ain't that gonna leave just Maggie on watch?" Rick exhaled, the sound halfway between a sigh and a groan. "Andrea'll be covering with her." Daryl smirked. "She really didn't go easy on you, huh?" Rick gave a tired look. "No, felt like having 2 Loris in the room." Itachi's eyes widened slightly. "That bad?" Rick gave a defeated smile. "You have no idea." Daryl chuckled under his breath. "I'm gonna go scrape this damn paint off before someone starts calling me a clown." Rick nodded, smiling faintly. "Go on. I'll find Glenn and T-Dog, let 'em know what's happening tomorrow." Itachi headed back to his cell, resisting the urge to throw one last jab Daryl's way. When he stepped into his cell, he stopped. The room wasn't the same anymore. A small table had been dragged against the wall. A chair sat with a folded sheet laid over the seat like a cushion. Someone had set a tin can on the table, rinsed clean and filled with a few wildflowers. A worn notebook waited beside it with a pen laid straight across the top. Footsteps in the corridor. Amy stopped at the doorway, a little out of breath, a rolled blanket in her arms. You're back already. He turned towards her with a faint smile. Yeah, just got back. Amy shifted the blanket in her arms as she stepped into the cell, setting it down carefully. How did it go? Much simpler than I expected, Itachi said. Only a few walkers. Amy glanced up at him. Guess that's about as good as it gets these days. She smiled faintly. Still, I'm glad it went that way. Itachi looked at the folded sheet on his bed. What's that for? Amy glanced toward the cell doors. Beth and I found a few bigger sheets earlier. I figured if I tied one corner up to the bars and left the other side with a bit of string, you could tie it to the bar when you want to close it, then leave it open during the day. I thought it'd give you a little more privacy. He looked at her more closely, the dirt smudged along her sleeves, the faint bruises on her fingers, the quiet proof of how much effort she'd put into all of it. She turned towards him. I tried to make it feel a little less empty. Hope you like it. He didn't say anything. Just closed the small space between them and kissed her. Amy went still for a moment, her eyes flickering before they closed as she leaned into him, her arms slowly sliding around his shoulders while his found their way around her waist. They pulled back just enough to meet each other's eyes. Amy smiled. Guess that answered it, she whispered before kissing him again. They separated slowly, still close enough for the moment to linger. Itachi started to say something, but a voice echoed from the hall. Can we talk, please? Jimmy. Beth's reply came sharply. I said I need some time alone. Come on, just hear me out, Jimmy pushed. A pause. Then Beth again, louder. Let go of me. Jimmy's voice followed, strained but still trying to sound calm. Just hear me out, won't you? Amy turned towards the cell doors, confusion flashing across her face, still half in Itachi's arms. Itachi didn't move, but when the light caught his face, his eyes were glowing red, all warmth from a moment ago gone, replaced by pure anger. Test tube author's note. Thank you all so much for the support, over 500 plus power stones. Let me know what you thought about this chapter, did you enjoy it, or not so much? Your feedback always helps to improve the story. Blackheart thanks again for reading. 45 comments 0 vote. Chapter 53. Inside Scoop. Less than third person POV greater than. Itachi and Amy stepped out of their cell, stopping when they saw Beth a few feet away with Jimmy gripping her hand, refusing to let go. Itachi's eyes moved between them. What's going on? Jimmy let go right away. It's not what it looks like. We were just talking. Amy's gaze flicked between the two of them. The only one doing the talking seems to be just you. She turned to Beth with a faint smile. Why don't you come with me for now? Beth hesitated, uncertainty flickering in her eyes before she gave a small nod, and Amy looked toward Itachi, catching the faint tilt of his head that told her enough. Without another word, she turned back to Beth and said quietly, come on, guiding her down the hall towards her cell until the two of them disappeared around the corner. When they were gone, Itachi looked back at Jimmy. Let's have a chat. He didn't wait for a response, already walking towards the exit. Jimmy stood still for a few seconds before following him out into the courtyard. Once they were outside, Jimmy tried to speak. Itachi cut him off. I don't care. Jimmy frowned, his tone caught between irritation and unease. Then why'd you even drag me out here? Itachi's eyes locked on him. To warn you. Whatever's going on between you and her isn't my concern, but the moment you lay a hand on her again, you're out. Jimmy's face tightened, his voice sharper than he meant. Who the hell made you the boss? He stepped closer, trying to stand his ground. We're the same age, man. You don't get to walk around like you own the place. Itachi didn't answer. He just stared at him, like he was deciding whether to end the conversation or end something else. Then Glenn's voice cut in. Whoa, hey, easy. Glenn jogged over, slowing as he reached them. Let's not do anything stupid here, alright? He dragged Jimmy by the arm, guiding him back. Come on, man, let's take a walk, alright? No need to make this worse. Jimmy resisted a step, then gave way, still glaring past Glenn. Glenn looked at Itachi as he backed away, the words leaving him in one quick rush. Don't worry about it, I'll handle him. Itachi sighed, deciding to let Glenn handle it before he did something he'd regret. Without another word, he gave a slight nod and turned back inside. Glenn waited until Itachi was out of sight before letting out a slow breath. You've got some serious balls, you know that. He muttered, then looked at Jimmy. I don't know what happened between you two, but I heard what you said, and it doesn't matter who was in the wrong. His tone hardened. Show him some respect. He released Jimmy's arm, shaking his head. And for the record, he practically does own the place. Inside, Itachi had already made his way back to his cell, where Amy was waiting for him. The moment he stepped in, she lifted her head, meeting his eyes with a small, curious look. How did it go? She asked. He sat down on his bed. Annoying. Amy laughed softly and took a seat beside him. Well, he's kind of jealous of you. Itachi glanced her way, genuinely puzzled. Why? Now it was her turn to give him that same look. You're really asking that? He didn't respond, just waited for her to go on. She smiled, shaking her head. Let's see, you're the same age, but look at what you're doing, and what he's doing. It's not exactly a fair comparison. Amy leaned against his shoulder. Doesn't help that he's not even allowed to carry a gun when Carl's got one, she said with a small smile, remembering the moment. And when he asked Shane if he could get one and got turned down, Carl kinda rubbed it in his face. Itachi smiled, leaning his head against hers. Now I know why Lori was on my case. She grinned. Oh no, she found out way before that. That was actually when she decided to let him keep it. Itachi looked at her, surprised. She did. Amy nodded, enjoying his reaction. Yeah, she made a whole list of rules for him, but as long as he follows them, she's fine with it. He nodded slowly, giving her a look that carried just enough suspicion. How do you know everything? Amy smiled, a little sheepish. You know, your training kinda comes in handy. Itachi gave her a deadpan look. It wasn't meant for you to eavesdrop on people. She shrugged. I only eavesdropped on Lori. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. Amy hesitated, then sighed. And on Beth and Jimmy. He kept staring. Her voice dropped. And on Herschel, Glenn, Maggie, and Jackie. Itachi didn't say anything. He just stared at her, torn between being impressed she'd pulled it off or concerned that she'd chosen to spend her time spying on people. Amy caught the look and turned fully toward him. Hey, don't judge. We girls like a little drama, alright. If it were Andrea, she'd grab a chair, sit right next to a cell, and wait to hear something interesting. She wouldn't even try to hide it. Itachi's brow twitched as he raised his voice slightly. You mean like how she's walking over here with a chair right now? There was a pause, then the faint sound of whistling started up, drifting farther away as Andrea immediately turned back like nothing had happened. Amy looked at him, a grin tugging at her lips. See what I mean? Itachi shook his head, amused. Remind me to never underestimate your information network. Amy smirked. If you ever want the inside scoop, you know who to call. He smiled faintly. I'll keep that in mind. Amy hesitated for a second before adding, speaking of it, I actually talked to Beth today. Before all that with Jimmy happened. Itachi asked. And, Amy leaned back a little, arms resting over her knees. Well, mostly about how they ended up together. They'd been dating for about 3 months before the world fell apart. School stuff, you know. Itachi stayed quiet, listening. She continued. I heard them talking a while back, well, more like arguing. From what I could piece together, Jimmy wasn't happy, said they weren't acting like a real couple. Amy let out a quiet sigh. And the worst part, he brought it up right after she tried to take her life. Thought that was the perfect time to talk about that kind of stuff. She shook her head, a short laugh slipping out. Oh, and it gets better, she actually tried hearing him out before he decided that meant she was fine with it and wanted to take the next step in their relationship. Beth didn't take it well and launched a vase at his face. Her voice dropped to a murmur. Lucky bastard dodged it, and then had the nerve to complain. Amy frowned. His excuse was that they'd been together for a couple of months, and it was normal for couples to take that next step, completely missing the part where she was furious about his amazing sense of timing. She gave a short, humorless laugh. That just set her off even more, and now she won't even talk to him. She leaned back again, shaking her head. Honestly, he's lucky she stopped him before he even tried anything. When Maggie told Herschel what happened, the old man was already reaching for his gun. You should have seen him. For a man who quotes the Bible every other sentence, he sure knew how to curse. Itachi let out a quiet chuckle. No amount of faith will stop a man from protecting his children. Amy smiled at his words. You should rest before dinner. You've barely had time to breathe these past few days. Before he could respond, she pushed him back onto the bed with a playful grin, landing on top of him as a quiet laugh slipped out. She rested her head against his chest, her arms still wrapped around him. Itachi hesitated for a moment, then let himself relax, one arm sliding around her shoulders. The steady rhythm of her breathing and the quiet hum of the prison faded into the background until sleep finally took them both. Hours slipped by unnoticed, the day outside moving on without them, until a sharp whistle finally broke the silence. Itachi's eyes opened instantly. He looked towards the bars and saw Daryl standing there, cleaned up for once, with a grin on his face that looked almost proud. Still grinning, Daryl spoke. Figured I'd tell ya that dinner's ready. Daryl turned to leave, the same easy grin still tugging at his face. Amy stirred in Itachi's arms, blinking herself awake. He brushed a hand lightly through her hair. Dinner's ready, he said quietly. She gave a sleepy nod and started to sit up, stretching before getting to her feet. The two of them got ready and made their way toward the others, who were already waiting for them in the common area. Test tube author's note. Thank you all so much for the support, over 900 plus power stones. Sorry for missing yesterday's upload, I'll try to drop 2 extra chapters this weekend to make up for it. If you've got any questions about the story or characters, feel free to drop them here, I'll do my best to answer each one. Let me know what you thought about this chapter, did you enjoy it, or not so much? Your feedback always helps to improve the story. Blackheart, thanks again for reading. 40 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 54, Setting Out. Less than third person POV greater than. Amy and Itachi walked into the common area just as Jackie set the last pot down on the table, the rest of the group and the prisoners already gathered and waiting for them. Carol looked up first. You two took your time. Amy gave a small smile. We were just finishing up setting up the room. Jackie smirked. Sure you were. Carol shook her head, amused. All right, enough interrogation. Sit down before it gets cold. Both of them went to sit with the others, ignoring Jackie's comment as they took their seats near Daryl and Andrea. When they sat down, Itachi glanced towards Daryl, who was still grinning like an idiot. What's so funny? Daryl's smirk deepened. That you actually sleep with a teddy bear. What's next? You some kinda royal prince. Amy looked at Daryl. Who are you calling a teddy bear? She froze the second the words left her mouth. From across the table, Jackie shouted, I knew it. Something did happen. T-Dog turned to Glenn with a grin. Told you, man. Pay up. Glenn muttered under his breath, lucky guess. Amy looked around, completely lost. Wait, what? Andrea, sitting beside her, smiled. Well, it's not exactly a secret that you two liked each other. Bets were going around about when you'd finally make it official. Amy turned to her, half in disbelief. You can't be serious. Oh, I am, Andrea said, her grin widening. And it started a long time ago. She looked towards Rick. Even Rick and Shane joined in. Rick cleared his throat, doing his best to ignore her, while Shane just stared daggers across the table. Amy muttered, unbelievable. Itachi gave a faint smile. At least they're having fun. Across the table, Sophia and Carl looked around at the laughter and confused chatter. Sophia leaned closer. What are they talking about? Carl shrugged. Sleeping, I think. Oscar leaned towards Axel, keeping his voice low. Man, you really picked the worst one to flirt with. Axel whispered back, a little tense. You think I don't know that? I didn't even know they were together. He kept his hands under the table, trying to stop the shaking. Oscar grinned. Good thing is, looks like he ain't holding a grudge. Big Tiny leaned in from the other side, curious. What y'all whisperin' about? Oscar leaned back. Ain't nothing, don't worry about it. Big Tiny just nodded, letting it go without another word. The room quieted down as everyone began eating, some talking among themselves while others kept their eyes on the inmates, still unsure what to think. Carol looked towards them after a moment of hesitation. Can I ask you something personal? Oscar glanced between his two friends before nodding. Sure, go ahead. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Why did you commit the crimes? Oscar answered almost immediately. Money, he said simply. Some guys I knew were planning a robbery, and I guess I got too tempted by all that talk about quick cash. I was already struggling to keep up with bills, and when my second kid was born, things just got worse, and what I had coming in wasn't enough anymore. Axel answered next, his tone a little awkward. Same reason, money. I got hooked on gambling and ran up a pile of debt. Would have been fine if I'd stopped there, but I didn't. Started using drugs to numb it all, and that just made things worse. Lost everything I had to my name. After that, no one would hire me, and the only way I saw to pay off what I owed was robbing. Big Tiny spoke last. My mom got in a car accident and, thankfully, she pulled through, but she didn't have insurance. When the hospital bills came, she couldn't pay them, and the bank started talking about taking the house if she kept missing mortgage payments. I was already working nights, but what I made wasn't nearly enough to help her, so I started sneaking back into the shop after hours, taking things I could sell just to keep her afloat, and after a few weeks of doing that, I got caught. Shane eyed them from across the table. If you think spilling sob stories is gonna make us feel sorry for you, don't waste your breath. Oscar shook his head. Ain't looking for sympathy, just telling everything honestly. Carol gave a small smile. Don't mind him. Carl leaned forward a little, trying to sound older than he was. I'll be keeping my eye on you guys. Big Tiny grinned. Fair enough, big guy. Carl smiled, and the dinner carried on. When it finally came to an end, everyone began cleaning up, the prisoners stepping in to help gather the dishes without being asked. Axel moved down the table, stacking plates in one arm while Carol was saying something to Sophia before the girl hurried off. He glanced towards Carol. So, she's your actual daughter. Carol looked at him, confused. Yes, why? Axel hesitated, motioning vaguely over his own head. No reason, just, no, the short hair and all. Carol blinked, trying to make sense of it. Then it hit her. Her expression shifted in an instant. Wait, you think I'm, she stopped herself, eyebrows lifting, a lesbian? Axel's eyes widened. No, that's not what I meant. I just, short hair. Thought you were. Carol finished for him. A lesbian. Axel rubbed the back of his neck. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you or anything like that. Daryl walked up to the two of them, eyes narrowing on Axel. Something wrong here. Axel turned quickly, forcing a nervous grin. Nah, man. Just got curious about something, that's all. Axel walked off toward Oscar to help him, still a little awkward. Daryl glanced at Carol. If he's bothering you, just say it. Carol let out a small laugh. He wasn't. He just got curious, that's all. Daryl gave a short nod and started helping Carol with the dishes. Before long, everything was cleaned up. Axel, Oscar, and Big Tiny headed back towards their block, leaving the others to settle down for the night. Itachi made his way back to his cell, changed into a clean shirt, and lay down on his bed. He'd barely closed his eyes when he caught the faint sound of footsteps approaching his cell. The steps stopped outside his door, followed by the soft scrape of metal as it opened. Amy stepped inside. She asked in a quiet voice. Mind if I sleep with you tonight? Itachi didn't answer, just lifted the edge of the sheet in silent invitation. She smiled and slipped in beside him, the narrow bed leaving no space between them as they found each other's warmth and settled quietly in each other's arms, slowly drifting off to sleep. The hours came and went without interruption until morning found them still together. Itachi was the first to wake. Amy slept beside him, her hand resting lightly on his chest. He stayed still for a moment, then carefully eased her arm aside and slipped out of bed, moving slowly enough not to wake her up. He walked to the common area where Daryl was already sitting, half awake and staring off at nothing. Good morning, Itachi said. Daryl looked over, a faint smirk forming. Now that's a surprise. Didn't think you were capable of sleeping in. He leaned back, the grin widening. What happened? Long knee. Before he could finish, Itachi pressed a hand over his mouth, brow twitching. Please don't start this early. Daryl said nothing, just kept grinning as Itachi pulled his hand away. The two went to pack their gear, checking weapons and supplies while waiting for Glenn and T-Dog to wake up. After a while, the others started to stir, the block slowly filling with quiet movement and low conversation as everyone gathered to see them off. When Amy finally appeared, Andrea was the first to notice. She turned towards her, pretending to be surprised. Well, look who finally showed up. Where were you last night? Amy shot her a look. Oh, hush. You're the one who kicked me out of the cell. Andrea shrugged, smiling. Guilty as charged. Amy ignored her, walking straight up to Itachi. She stopped in front of him, reached up, and kissed him softly before stepping back. Come back in one piece, alright. He smiled. Of course. Across the room, Jackie gave T-Dog a quick kiss on the cheek. Same goes for you. Don't make me worry. T-Dog chuckled. Yes, ma'am. Nearby, Maggie stepped up to Glenn and kissed him lightly. Just don't do anything stupid. Glenn smiled, trying to play it off. No promises. Carol walked up to Daryl as he slung his crossbow over his shoulder. I packed extra food for you, she said. It's in the glove compartment. Daryl glanced at her, giving a small nod. Thanks. She smiled faintly. Be careful out there. Always am, he said, though she caught the hint of a grin before he turned away. As they were getting ready to head out, Jimmy's voice came from behind them. Can I come too? I can help with the animals. T-Dog and Glenn both turned towards Itachi, waiting for his response. Before he could speak, Daryl cut in. Hell no. Last thing we need's a damn liability. This ain't playtime, kid. Jimmy frowned. But why can he go? He pointed slightly towards Itachi. Daryl's eyes narrowed, his voice sharpening. 'Cause 100 of you still wouldn't add up to half of him. Rick stepped in before it went any further. Jimmy, I get that you wanna help, and I appreciate it. But it's dangerous out there. I know you helped bring walkers to the barn, but that's not the same thing when there could be hundreds. Andrea, clearly not liking someone questioning her brother-in-law, shot Jimmy a glare. They've got enough to worry about without babysitting some scrawny kid who'd just slow them down. Rick shot her a hard look. Andrea, knock it off. She just shrugged, clearly unbothered. Rick turned back to Jimmy. When we left the farm, we made a lot of noise. There's no telling what's still out there. They're the best ones for this run, and the rest of us need to be here if something goes wrong. Jimmy didn't argue, but he didn't agree either, standing there with that stubborn look that said he wanted to say more but knew better than to try. Test tube author's note. Thank you all so much for the support, over 1300 plus power stones. I'll be uploading an extra chapter today, maybe even two, depending on how things go. If you've got any questions about the story or characters, feel free to drop them here, I'll do my best to answer each one. Let me know what you thought about this chapter, did you enjoy it, or not so much? Your feedback always helps me improve the story. Blackheart, thanks again for reading. 29 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 55, The Next Stop. Less than third person POV greater than. Two vehicles rolled out of the prison gates, the first with Glenn and T-Dog, the second with Daryl behind the wheel and Itachi riding shotgun. As the gate closed behind them, Rick stood watch until the locks clicked into place. He gave one last look before the convoy disappeared down the road. The drive stayed quiet for a long while, but the closer they got, the more signs of movement started to appear. A pair of walkers staggered along the roadside, both drifting in the same direction as them, towards the farm. No one spoke as the vehicles kept rolling until the familiar stretch of land came into view. The farm still stood, untouched, with only a few walkers drifting aimlessly near the house until the rumble of engines drew their attention. Glenn stepped out of the first car, crowbar in hand, scanning the property. Huh, place actually held up better than I thought. T-Dog climbed out beside him, gripping his fire axe. And here I was thinking we'd find the place overrun by now. Daryl and Itachi stepped out of the truck, eyes sweeping over the fields. Itachi started toward one of the approaching walkers. If the animals survived, that's all that matters, he said. He closed the distance in a few quick steps. When the walker reached for him, he spun around it and sliced its neck. The head hit the ground before the body even started to tip. He tossed a kunai into the walker's head to finish it, already moving towards the next. Daryl raised his crossbow, firing at another that had started limping towards them. Chickens should be fine, he said, lowering the weapon as he took out his hunting knife. Herschel mentioned he keeps them locked up. Itachi cut down another walker before speaking. There aren't many of them. Maybe the cows made it too. Daryl yanked his knife free from the walker at his feet. Far as I can tell, the fence held up around the place. Just one break where they pushed through, so they're probably fine. T-Dog stared at them, disbelief written all over his face. Man, y'all actin' like this some kind of Friday field trip. Glenn let out a shaky laugh. Now you know what I dealt with back at the CDC. He lifted his crowbar, lowering his voice like he was in an action movie. Come on, let's go give him a hand. T-Dog gave him a flat look and raised his axe. Man, why you acting like this all of a sudden? Glenn blinked. What? I thought it'd be cool. T-Dog shook his head. Then you need more practice. He started heading towards the approaching walker, gripping the axe tight. When it got close enough, he swung with full force, the blade burying deep in its head before he yanked it free. Glenn muttered, still near the car, I did practice. Everything stopped as the three of them turned to look back at Glenn. He looked around at them, sounding defensive. Oh, come on, it's every guy's dream to say at least one cool line in his life. Daryl grunted, pulling an arrow from the walker. Ain't wrong about that. Glenn brightened a little. Finally, someone gets it. He stepped away from the car, gripping his crowbar, and walked toward the last walker. When it got close, he swung hard, cracking it across the head and knocking it to the ground before slamming the crowbar down again to finish it off. The others smiled at Glenn's antics before regrouping, as they started checking the farm. They circled around the house, scanning the fields for any sign of movement. Glenn squinted towards the far side and pointed. There. Everyone turned. 3 cows stood near the tree line, alive. Daryl let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned. Guess luck's still on our side. T-Dog grinned. Yeah, now let's just hope the bull made it too. He did, Itachi said quietly. They followed his line of sight to the fence, where the bull stood there chewing the grass without a care in the world. Daryl nodded. All right, you two bring him back closer. We'll get the trailer ready. Itachi added, there should be some rope in the shed. T-Dog frowned. Hold up, why's it gotta be us? Itachi answered. We still need to check on that walker in the barn. Glenn sighed. Yay, lucky us. They split up. T-Dog and Glenn went off to find some rope while Itachi and Daryl headed towards the barn. Daryl glanced over. What we need that walker for, anyway? Itachi smirked slightly. We don't. Daryl let out a rough chuckle. So I ain't the only one didn't wanna deal with it. The two shared a faint smile as they reached the barn, deciding to look around for anything useful just to kill some time, ignoring the walker still chained to the wall. They started rummaging through what was left, a few cracked buckets, some rope, and a half-open box near the back. Inside were several small sacks filled with seeds, most still sealed. They didn't find anything else useful besides the seeds, so they packed them up and left the rest behind. Then the walker, chained to the wall, let out a low groan, breaking the quiet. Daryl glanced over towards it. Jenner ever find anything useful from it? Itachi shook his head. Nothing substantial. We can kill it. Daryl gave a short nod and walked over. The sound of metal slicing through flesh echoed once, then silence. Itachi looked his way. Let's find the trailer before the others get back. They left the barn and followed the dirt path behind it, heading towards where Herschel had said the trailer would be. When they found it, the old thing was right where he'd described, parked beside a rusted tractor, a thin layer of dust covering the metal frame. Daryl gave a short nod. I'll get the car. Itachi waited while he went back for Glenn and T-Dog's ride. When Daryl returned, they hooked the trailer up and drove it over towards the field, where Glenn was already struggling to herd the cows. The two stepped out of the car, watching as Glenn wrestled with a stubborn rope. Can I get some help here? Glenn shouted, digging his heels in as one of the cows yanked back. Daryl smirked. Nah, you look like you're doing fine. Glenn shot him a glare. Oh, come on. Just help me out already. Daryl sighed, shaking his head. You're lucky I'm feeling generous today. Itachi and Daryl walked over, each grabbing a rope. With Glenn pulling from the front and the two guiding from the sides, they finally got the cows moving and loaded into the trailer. Once they were done, they climbed back into the car and drove off towards T-Dog. When they pulled up, T-Dog was standing a few yards away, gripping the rope in both hands while the bull stared him down like it was just waiting for an excuse to charge. Daryl got out of the car, looking between the two of them, grinning. You two need a minute alone, or... T-Dog shot him a look. Man, don't start. Things been giving me the death stare since I got here. Glenn nodded toward the bull. It's okay, man, I get it. He looks mean, but he's just scared. T-Dog turned his head slowly, giving Glenn a flat look. Real funny, man. He sighed. You coming to help or just running commentary? Itachi glanced over at him, unfazed. I was waiting to see who'd win first. Daryl chuckled. My money's on the bull. They finally decided to help the poor man, and after a minute of pushing, pulling, and a lot more cursing than actual progress, the three of them managed to drag the bull towards the trailer. Once it was secured, T-Dog looked back at Itachi. Yo, you sure it's a good idea keeping the bull with the cows? Itachi shrugged. It's a short trip. They should be fine. Daryl closed the trailer door with a solid thud. Long as that thing doesn't start getting ideas, we're good. T-Dog exhaled, glancing towards Glenn. Next time, you're getting the bull. Glenn just ignored him, pretending not to hear as they all climbed back into the car and headed towards the chicken coop. When they arrived, they stepped inside, spotting a couple of fresh eggs in the nests. They gathered them carefully, placing each one into Glenn's and T-Dog's backpacks. Glenn looked at the chickens, then at the trailer. Where exactly are we gonna put them? We can't just toss them in with the cows. Daryl smirked. Guess that makes them our passengers. T-Dog muttered under his breath, man, why'd we even come here? They spent the next few minutes wrangling the chickens, stuffing them into the car. By the time they were done, Glenn and T-Dog were crammed into the front seats with feathers flying everywhere. One chicken flapped across the dashboard while another pecked at the window, and Glenn sat there holding the rooster in his arms, looking completely done with life. Itachi stood outside with Daryl, a faint smile crossing his face. Have a safe trip back. Glenn spat a feather out of his mouth and flipped them both off as T-Dog drove off, muttering something that sounded a lot like regret. Itachi and Daryl headed back to their car, leaving the chaos behind as they drove off to secure more supplies. Test tube author's note. Thank you all so much for the support, over 1500 plus power stones. I've got a question for you guys, do you know any fanfics, novels, or books with really well-written fight scenes? I want to level up the action for the upcoming chapters, so if you've got any good ones in mind, drop them here. If you've got any questions about the story or characters, feel free to drop them here, I'll do my best to answer each one. Let me know what you thought about this chapter, did you enjoy it, or not so much? Your feedback always helps me improve the story. Blackheart, thanks again for reading. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 56. Brothers on the Hunt. Less than third person POV greater than. They were on their way to their first stop, an old gas station a few miles ahead. The ride stayed quiet, the low hum of the engine filling the silence as Itachi drove and Daryl sat beside him, watching the road roll by. Daryl glanced over, one hand resting on the door. You sure this is your first time? Itachi hesitated, eyes still on the road. I think so. Daryl blinked. You think so? How the hell don't you know if you've ever driven a car before? Itachi just shrugged, the corners of his mouth twitching faintly. He wasn't sure how to explain it, he hadn't, but maybe the body had. Daryl muttered under his breath. Weirdo. He leaned back in his seat, the silence stretching a moment before he spoke again. I gotta ask, what's up with your eyes? Itachi shot him a quick glance. What do you mean? Ah, come on, Daryl said. When your eyes went all red back in the shed. You some kind of bloodsucker or what? Would sure explain a hell of a lot. Itachi's grip on the wheel tightened slightly. I'm not a vampire. And what's that supposed to mean? Daryl shrugged. Hell if I know, man. I'm just saying. Last I checked, people's eyes don't go glowing red. Itachi went quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. It happens when I push my vision to its limit, he said finally. Everything sharpens, clearer, faster. It's like the world slows down for a few seconds. Daryl looked at him, his mouth slightly open. You realize how damn crazy that sounds, right? He sat back, shaking his head with a laugh that was more disbelief than humor. First the dead start walking, now you got damn super eyes. He paused. Hold up, you think there's a chance I got something too? Itachi smiled. You did, sharp tongue and a short temper. Daryl stared at him for a second, then snorted. Smartass. Itachi continued. Those eyes, they're something innate to my clan. Daryl frowned, rubbing the back of his neck. Man, this shit's getting too complicated. Itachi gave a quiet chuckle. My clan's called the Uchiha, he said. We're all connected by blood, generations of the same family. Those eyes are something we're born with, a trait passed down through us. Daryl blinked. So let me get this straight, y'all got the same last name, and there's more of you out there with them weird-ass eyes. Itachi nodded once. Pretty much. The thought alone made Daryl shudder at the idea that there was an entire clan of people like Itachi out there. Itachi noticed. You alright? Yeah, Daryl muttered. Just trying to wrap my head around it all. After a while, Daryl spoke again. Ain't never asked you before, you got any brothers or sisters? Itachi shook his head. Just my parents. Daryl nodded, waiting for more, but it didn't come. Itachi's gaze drifted for a moment, his focus somewhere else entirely. He tried to remember their names, the ones that should have come easily. But there was nothing. Just a blank stretch of thought where something important should have been. Only two names surfaced, ones that didn't belong to him, yet felt carved into his mind. Fugaku. Makoto. He blinked, almost surprised by them, the sound of those names sitting strangely on his tongue. Daryl glanced his way. You good? Yeah, Itachi said after a pause, voice distant. Just thinking. But the look in his eyes said otherwise, like he'd reached for a piece of his past and found only empty air. Shit, stop the car. Daryl said suddenly, his tone urgent. Itachi's focus snapped back. He hit the brakes hard, the truck jolting to a stop. Up ahead, a few hundred feet down the road, an old gas station sat at the edge of the trees. Two cars were parked out front, along the curb. Even from this distance, they could tell that they didn't look abandoned. Daryl squinted towards the station. What do you wanna do? Itachi eased the truck off the road, guiding it behind a cluster of trees until it was mostly hidden from view. He killed the engine. Let's check it out. Daryl gave a short nod, reaching into the back seat. He grabbed his crossbow and passed the hunting rifle to Itachi. Both men stepped out quietly, keeping low as their eyes locked on the gas station ahead. Itachi dropped to the grass, setting the rifle down and peering through the scope while Daryl took cover behind a nearby tree. You see anything? He whispered. Itachi traced the building. The windows were dark at first, nothing moved. Then a shape flickered past the glass. There's movement inside, he said. And it's not a walker. Too fast. Daryl's voice came low. You think they heard us? Maybe, Itachi murmured, still watching. There's a good chance he froze mid-sentence. Two men appeared in his scope, dragging a pair of struggling kids out the front door. Their screams were muffled and desperate as they kicked and fought to break free, but the men kept hauling them towards one of the cars. Daryl was already moving, loading a round into his crossbow. Yeah, they ain't the friendly type. Itachi steadied his aim on one of the men. Be careful. There could be more inside. Yeah, I know, Daryl muttered, eyes locked on the station. Itachi tracked the two men as they shoved the girls into the back seat and slammed the door. A flash of blonde hair in the window caught his attention, two small shapes pressed together, but the thought passed quickly as he fixed his aim on the men. The men turned back towards the station. Itachi exhaled slowly, the world slowing around him. His vision sharpened until every movement seemed to stretch, the sway of the men's steps, the faint tremor in their arms, even the dust twisting through the air. The second their paths aligned in his sight, he pulled the trigger. Two sharp cracks cut through the silence. Both men lurched forward, collapsing almost in sync as dark blood began to spill down the pavement. Inside the station, voices snapped to the front. One man stood frozen, staring at the two bodies lying motionless in front of him. Tom Cole, he muttered, disbelief twisting his voice. The man beside him grabbed his jacket and yanked him down. Get the hell down. One of them crouched low, inching towards the window. His breath fogged against the dusty glass as he leaned closer, trying to see what was out there. For a heartbeat, everything was still, then the glass exploded outward with a sharp crack. He dropped instantly, blood splattering across the tiles as shards of glass rained down around him. One of the men bolted towards the back exit. Screw this, I ain't dying here. He shouted, scrambling for the door. Wait, don't open it. Another yelled, panic cracking his voice as he tried to stop him. But he didn't listen. His hands shook as he fought with the lock until he finally wrenched it open. He stumbled into the daylight. A sharp thwip cut through the air. He froze mid-step, then dropped forward as a bolt was pierced through the side of his head. That stupid bastard, the same man hissed, aiming his pistol at the door, with trembling hands. A faint clink echoed near the front. Something rolled across the tile, tapping once against a rack before spinning to a stop, a glass bottle. Two of the men turned towards the sound. One raised his gun, the other gripped a rusted metal pipe. The man with the pipe started to speak. His voice cut off as steel punched through his throat, the blade driving clean through the shelf beside him. He choked once, before sliding to the floor as the weapon withdrew into the shadows behind the rack. Mark. The other man spun towards the noise just as the shelf groaned and tipped. His eyes barely caught his friend's body on the floor before the whole thing crashed down on him, knocking him flat, his pistol slipping from his hand and skidding across the floor. Daryl slipped in through the back, pistol raised. The man guarding the door turned too late, distracted by the commotion behind him. 3 quick shots echoed, and he went down before he could even aim. And now only one heartbeat answered, the trapped man beneath the shelf, breath hitching as his fingers stretched towards the pistol lying just out of reach. A sharp whistle cut through the air, followed by a heavy thunk. A kunai slammed through his hand and into the floor, pinning it there. The man screamed, the sound breaking into a hoarse gasp as his other hand clawed uselessly at the ground. Itachi stepped into view, the blade in his hand still dripping with crimson blood as the room fell silent around him, every sound swallowed by the weight of his presence. His face stayed still, no anger, no mercy, just that hollow emptiness. The pinned man lay there trembling, unable to look away, then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught movement. Another scavenger crept up behind Itachi, bat raised high, ready to swing. Itachi didn't turn. He drew his pistol in one smooth motion, keeping his eyes on the man pinned to the floor. A single shot cracked through the station. The scavenger with the bat dropped before he could swing. Smoke drifted from the barrel as Itachi shifted his aim downward. The pinned man's breath hitched, terror swallowing his words. And another shot. Then silence. When it was finally over, Itachi and Daryl regrouped near the back door, checking each room before stepping out into the open air. The two cars still sat where they'd been left. Daryl moved first, circling to the vehicle where the girls had been shoved. He pulled the door open slowly. Inside, two little girls huddled together on the back seat, clutching each other so tightly it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. Their faces were streaked with tears, eyes wide and wet with fear. Itachi stopped a few feet away, the sight freezing him where he stood. Recognition hit like a punch to the chest. Blonde hair. Small faces he'd seen before, but younger now. Lizzie, and Mika. He muttered. Fuck. The word hung in the air, swallowed by the quiet. Test tube author's note. I'll probably skip a day of uploading tomorrow so I can go through all the suggestions you guys sent me. I really want to improve the action scenes since I just don't feel like they're good enough yet. And before anyone asks how Lizzie, Mika would have arrived at Woodbury and where their father is, most of it will be explained in the next chapter. If you've got any questions about the story or the characters, drop them below, I'll do my best to answer every one. Let me know what you thought of this chapter, did you enjoy it, or not so much? Your feedback always helps me make the story better. Blackheart thanks again for reading. 35 comments 0 vote. Chapter 57, Father and Daughters. Less than third person POV greater than. Daryl just stood there, staring at the two girls huddled together on the back seat, both trembling so hard it looked like they might disappear if they could. He had no idea what to say or how even to start. Beside him, Itachi stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the girls while his mind raced through 1,000 thoughts. Daryl took a small step closer. Hey, easy now. Ain't nobody gonna hurt ya. Instead of calming them, the sound of his voice only made them shrink further back into the corner of the seat, their eyes darting between him and Itachi in panic. Daryl turned towards Itachi, his voice dropping into a sharp whisper. Little help here. Itachi stepped forward slowly, lowering himself to one knee beside the car. You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you. Daryl shot him a flat look. He'd tried the same thing a moment ago, and it hadn't worked then, so he sure as hell didn't expect it to now. Itachi waited a moment before speaking again. My name's Itachi. That's Daryl. He glanced toward the man beside him before turning back to them. Can you tell me your names? The smaller girl hesitated, her voice trembling when she finally spoke. Mika. Lizzie stayed quiet, her gaze flicking between them. Itachi gave a small nod. All right, Mika. Nice to meet you. He looked toward the older one. And what might your name be? Lizzie shifted a little, still clutching her sister's arm. Lizzie. He smiled at them gently. Can you tell me where your parents are? Lizzie glanced at her sister, then looked back at them, her voice trembling. We got separated. Daddy told us to wait here, he's coming back. He stayed with them a moment longer, asking questions where they'd been, how long they'd waited as bit by bit, he started to piece it together. While he talked, Daryl kept watch, moving along the edge of the lot, scanning the tree line in the road. When Itachi finally stepped back and closed the car door, Daryl looked over. So, what's the story? Itachi stopped beside him. They'd been staying out in the woods with their father when a few walkers wandered close to their camp, so he grabbed the girls and ran here. More started showing up not long after, so he told them to hide in the storage room while he drew the rest away from the station. Daryl frowned. And them bastards showed up after. Itachi gave a short nod. They must have come to scavenge and found the girls. Daryl glanced at him, half irritated. Now why the hell they talk to you and not me? Itachi just smiled and pointed at his face. Guess I look friendlier. Daryl scoffed. Yeah, real friendly until you're in a fight. He paused for a beat, then added, so what now? Itachi thought for a moment. We wait until their father shows up. Daryl's tone dropped, sounding more doubtful. You think he's still alive? Itachi hesitated. He should be. But even he couldn't shake the thought. If they hadn't shown up, how would the girls have survived long enough to ever see their father again, and was he even alive? Daryl gave a short nod and started heading towards their car. I'll bring the truck closer. Itachi watched him go, then walked back towards the car. He opened the front door and sat in the passenger seat, turning slightly to face the girls. You two must be hungry, he said gently. Mika nodded right away, while Lizzie just stared at him without saying anything. Itachi reached into his pocket and pulled out a couple of granola bars as he handed one to each of them. Both girls took them right away, tearing the wrappers and eating in small bites between mumbled thank yous. Eat slowly. There's more if you want. Mika nodded, chewing quietly. While Lizzie just kept staring at him. How old are you two? He asked. I'm 8, Mika said. 10, Lizzie added quickly. Lizzie hesitated before speaking. When's Daddy coming back? Itachi met her eyes. I don't know, but we'll wait here until he does. Lizzie nodded, falling quiet. A moment later, her head tilted slightly, eyes drifting towards the corner of the car as if she was listening to something faint. Mika looked at her. What is it? Lizzie blinked, her focus snapping back. Nothing, she said quickly, returning to her granola bar. Itachi watched her for a second longer but said nothing. A few seconds later, Daryl pulled up with the truck and went straight to scavenging the station. An hour passed while Itachi stayed with the girls, keeping them company and managing to calm them down bit by bit. Outside, Daryl worked through the wreckage, stripping what he could from the bodies and gathering anything useful left inside the gas station. Itachi spotted movement down the road as a lone walker dragging itself along the road. Then another stepped into view, and another after that. Within moments, the entire stretch was crowded with them, all packed shoulder to shoulder and shuffling down the road. He looked towards the window and immediately caught Daryl's eyes through the glass. They'd both seen it. Itachi moved fast, climbing into the driver's seat and motioning towards Daryl. Daryl didn't hesitate, he slammed the trunk shut and climbed in. Within seconds, both engines roared to life as they drove off. In the back seat, Mika's voice cracked. We can't leave. Daddy isn't here yet. Lizzie looked at him, confusion etched on her face. Why do we always have to run from them? Itachi kept his eyes on the rearview mirror. We'll find your dad, he said evenly. But we can't stay here. He hesitated, glancing at Lizzie for a brief moment before adding, they're like the bad men, remember? You can't let them get close. The car went quiet, only Mika's small sobs filled the silence as she pressed her face into her sister's shoulder. Lizzie wrapped her arms around her, holding on tightly. Itachi said nothing more, just kept driving. The road curved through the trees, and as they cleared the next bend, a figure appeared ahead, a man stumbling along the roadside. Daddy! Mika screamed, pressing against the glass. Lizzie shouted after her, voice breaking. Itachi slowed the truck, pulling up beside the man. He rolled the window down. Get in, he called out. The man blinked through the exhaustion. Mika. Lizzie. Daddy. They both cried again. Get in, Itachi said firmly. I'll explain everything. Ryan didn't waste a second. He yanked the door open and climbed into the back seat, pulling both girls into his arms. They clung to him, sobbing, while he tried to catch his breath. With shaking hands, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small pill bottle, twisting the cap off before handing a single pill to Lizzie. Here, sweetheart, he said softly. You didn't take it this morning. Only then did he look up at Itachi, confusion written across his face. What's going on? Test tube author's note. If you've got any questions about the story or the characters, drop them below, I'll do my best to answer every one. Let me know what you thought of this chapter. Did you enjoy it, or not so much? Your feedback always helps me make the story better. And if you're enjoying the fanfic, consider leaving a review, it really helps more than you'd think. Blackheart, thanks again for reading. 37 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 58, The Detour. Less than third person POV greater than. In the back seat, the two girls had finally fallen asleep. Mika's head rested against her sister's shoulder, while Lizzie clung to her father's sleeve even in her dreams. Itachi had just finished explaining what had happened at the gas station, the ambush, the men, and the rescue, while Ryan just nodded slowly. His gaze softened when he looked at his daughters. Thank you for saving them. His voice cracked a little. They're all I've got left. Itachi just nodded, waiting a moment before asking, if I may ask, what was that you gave to Lizzie earlier? Ryan reached into his jacket and pulled out an orange bottle. These are her meds. Itachi glanced at the rearview mirror. Medication for what? Ryan hesitated, then sighed. She's suffering from schizophrenia. He spoke the word slowly, like it physically hurt to say it. At first, the symptoms only showed up when she was under heavy stress. Even then, it was rare, she'd get distant or talk to herself, see things that weren't there. But after, his voice trailed off. After the incident with her mother, it got worse. Itachi stayed quiet, waiting. Ryan looked down at the bottle, his hand shaking. We were at our house when it all started. We tried to leave the city right away, but, he paused, as tears started to form in his eyes. While we were running to the car, she got grabbed out of nowhere, with Lizzie still in her arms. He swallowed hard, wiping at his eyes before the tears could fall. After that, she stopped talking for days. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. Then out of nowhere, she started asking when her mom was coming back. I tried telling her the truth, that she was gone, but she wouldn't listen. She just kept saying her mom was still alive, and that she'd come back, just like them. Itachi murmured, and then she started hearing them talk. Ryan's eyes widened as he nodded. Yeah, her symptoms got worse. The next time she saw walkers, she started talking to them, telling me and Mika they were just being friendly. He paused. Only when she takes the meds do the voices stop. Itachi let out a quiet sigh. I can give you two choices. Ryan looked over, confused. Choices. I can leave you somewhere safe with some food, Itachi said evenly, or you can come with us. His eyes drifted toward Lizzie. But there will have to be rules for her. Ryan thought it through before asking, what kind of rules? She'll need to be monitored, Itachi replied. I know it might not seem fair for a 10-year-old, but she could put the others in danger, and we can't take that risk. Still, you'll have a safe place to sleep and plenty of food. Ryan didn't answer right away. He looked down, torn. It didn't sit right with him, his little girl being treated like some kind of danger, but deep down he knew their luck wouldn't last much longer out here alone. Finally, he looked back at Itachi. When you say monitored, you mean just keeping an eye on her, right? Itachi gave a short nod. More or less. She'll have a few restrictions, but nothing she'll notice. Ryan nodded slowly. If that's all, I can agree to it. It is, Itachi said. We'll arrange sleeping quarters for you when we arrive. But I do have to ask, what did you do before the outbreak? Ryan leaned back. I used to work as a solar technician back in Florida, installing panels, wiring small systems for homes and businesses. A faint smile started creeping across Itachi's face. Do you happen to know any sites nearby that might have panels? And what would you need to set them up? Ryan nodded slightly. You'll want to look for an electrical distributor or a solar supply company. They're typically located on the edge of industrial zones, near highways, and if I'm not mistaken, there should be one about an hour's drive from here. Itachi leaned in a little. And what would you need to make it work? Panels, obviously, Ryan said with a faint smile. But I'd also need batteries, deep cycle ones, plus a charge controller, an inverter, and clean copper wiring. If we can find even half of that, I could rig something small. Itachi nodded, then eased the car to a stop on the side of the road. The tires crunched against gravel before the engine went quiet. Daryl's truck pulled up right behind them, the rumble dying down as he climbed out. He looked towards Itachi. Something wrong. Itachi shook his head. Quite the opposite. We're making a short detour on the way back. Daryl lifted one brow. Where to? Itachi met his eyes. To a solar panel site. Daryl shrugged. Sounds good to me, but we gotta move fast before it starts getting dark. Itachi gave a small nod and turned back towards the car. Daryl followed, climbing into his truck, and the two vehicles rolled out, heading towards where the site should be. The drive wasn't short. Every few miles, they passed abandoned cars or the occasional walker shuffling down the road. After a while, something caught Itachi's eye, a faint shimmer off to the right. As they drove a little farther, the view opened up, revealing rows of solar panels glinting in the fading sunlight. He drove off the road and followed the dirt driveway leading towards them. The car came to a stop right next to a building resembling a small warehouse. The sudden stillness made the girl stir awake in the back seat. Lizzie rubbed her eyes. Where are we? She asked, glancing out the window. Ryan glanced back at her with a small, reassuring smile. We're going somewhere safe, sweetheart. Somewhere with plenty of food. But first, we just need to make a quick stop here. Lizzie nodded, half awake, and leaned back against her seat while Mika just smiled at the mention of food. Itachi glanced towards them before stepping out of the car. Stay inside while we check it out. Ryan just nodded, while the girls blinked, still half asleep. Itachi walked over to Daryl, who was already climbing out of his truck and scanning the area. So, what's the plan? Daryl asked. I'll check the warehouse for walkers, Itachi said. You stay out here and keep watch. Once it's clear, Ryan will take a look around and see if he can find what he needs. Daryl gave a short nod. Got it. Itachi moved towards the warehouse. The metal door creaked as he opened it. Inside, the dim light spilled through broken windows, cutting across rows of crates and scattered tools. A faint shuffling came from deeper inside. Two walkers wandered between the shelves. He barely glanced their way, just kept looking around as his hands moved on instinct. Two kunai flew out almost at the same time, piercing both walkers through the head before either could take another step. He continued looking around, scanning each corner to make sure the place was clear. Then he stepped back outside. Daryl turned when he saw him. All clear. Itachi nodded. It's clear. He motioned to Ryan, who climbed out of the car and followed him inside. Ryan's eyes lit up the moment he stepped in. Damn, this place is a gold mine. He moved quickly, checking shelves and boxes, pulling open dusty containers until he found what he needed. Wiring, a few battery units still sealed in their boxes, tools, and some cables. These'll do, Ryan said, placing the last item near the exit. Itachi glanced at the pile of equipment. Now all we need are the panels. There are plenty of tools here, Ryan replied. I can take the one outside apart. For now, just grab two, Itachi said, looking towards him. One for each car. There should be some rope or straps around to secure them to the roof. Ryan nodded, grabbing a few tools before heading outside. He didn't fully disassemble the panels, just removed the stands and frames to make them easier to carry. Itachi found a set of straps near the corner and, with Daryl's help, they carefully lifted the panels onto the roofs. Once the windows were open, they looped the straps through and tightened them down until everything was secure. Ryan wiped his hands on his jeans, stepping back to look over their work. That should do it. Itachi gave a short nod. Then let's go back for now. We'll return tomorrow for more. The engines started up again, as they pulled back onto the road, heading back to the prison. Test tube author's note. If you've got any questions about the story or the characters, drop them below, I'll do my best to answer every one. Let me know what you thought of this chapter. Did you enjoy it, or not so much? Your feedback always helps me make the story better. And if you're enjoying the fanfic, consider leaving a review, it really helps more than you'd think.